The votes of the Electoral College were formally confirmed by Congress today.
Form and authentic, and it appears throughout that Donald J. Trump of the state of New York received 6 votes for president.
Now that's important because it affirms Joe Biden as the next president of the United States. But all the fuss might have you wondering, what is this old flawed system? Why does America still use it? And how could it be improved? The Electoral College, a familiar sight and thought for any mildly politically involved American, the number 538 probably burned into your skull every 4 years, either a comforting blessing or a restless curse. The phrase, "Americans don't vote for their president, the Electoral College does," is so uniquely obvious that it barely needs explanation. It's true. The way that the portion of eligible voters who actually show up to the polls vote doesn't matter, but the way that 538 of those people, who are vaguely obliged to meet the wants of the former, does. Though it seems undemocratic, that's on purpose. It's meant to compromise between multiple different definitions for fairness and representation. This is more of an opinion video than it is an education video, but you still need some context. The Electoral College has existed for hundreds of years, and so has opposition to it. It's controversial, and I assume you know why, especially since the 2000 and the 2016 elections, where the loser won and the winner lost. It's an important topic, easily one of the most. It's foundational. Other problems cannot be solved with an inefficient government, and a democratic government cannot be efficient without the support of its people. Therefore, everyone's been essentially forced to have an opinion on whether or not the blatant anti-democratic tendencies are a ruining force in American politics, or if those are actually the whole point. Not sure which side is right for you? Here's how you can be a pretentious ass like me and pick neither nor the fence between them. The argument for the Electoral College is that putting a minimum on how many votes a state has allows smaller states a proportionally larger say, which then prevents large cities from deciding the election alone. When smaller states matter more, the unique concerns of people from those states are likelier to be taken more seriously, or at least that's the theory, remember that for later. You've probably heard that Wyomingans have about 4 times more electoral representation per person than Californians do. True, but it's not always very helpful to think about representation in this way. It's not the whole population of each state that votes, it's just the voters. That distinction is less important today than it was historically, when some types of people weren't allowed to vote, but that's a story for a different time. If we take only those who voted into account, the numbers look more like this. A little better, but pretty much the same. Some states change more or less, largely a product of voter suppression or just apathy. But from where does such suppression and apathy come? Well, let's narrow to one type of voter to investigate. How much influence do, say, Republican voters have over who is elected president? That's right, a Republican in California actually gets no say over who is elected president. Despite this Republican bloc being larger than any other states, their vote means nothing. How depressing. If that was you, would that not make you want to stop voting, knowing that your vote has literally zero influence over the country? In fact, more than half of Trump's voters had their ballot go on to receive zero representation in the Electoral College. Nearly 75 million Americans are like this. That's 47% of the electorate unheard. That's not people who stayed at home, that's the electorate. That's people who took time out of their day to make sure that their voice was heard. For Trump, Biden, or third party, that voice was silenced. This is the toxicity at the center of the Electoral College, the words winner take all. When was the last time you saw candidates fighting over Kansas, or Rhode Island, or Arkansas? Truthfully, the Electoral College fails at its job. It doesn't make smaller states more heard, it just makes states with closer races more heard. So what's my compromise? Well, most of the time, electors are allowed to vote however they want, and that fact has been upheld by the Supreme Court. There's already an interstate pact trying to take advantage of that by just voting for whoever wins the largest portion nationwide, but there's an even easier way that would still keep the functionality of supersizing small states. Just award electoral votes for each state proportional to that state's voters. 26% of Wyomingans voted for Biden. That rounds to 1 out of the 3 votes. 34% of Californians voted for Trump. Well, that's enough for 19 votes. Biden still wins in this scenario, of course, but think about how much easier it would be to run a third-party campaign knowing that it's about winning American people, not American land. Suddenly, it's not even about just who wins, it's about how much they win by. Therefore, everyone's vote matters again. And what do people do when they feel like their vote matters? They vote.